Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
In Tony's mansion in New York City, Tony, in his lab, looked at the information in the email, feeling very surprised. Ivan. Wasn't he locked up? Feeling anxious, Tony immediately called out, "Jarvis, play it." With Jarvis's control, the video recorded by Ivan began to appear on the large screen. In the video, Ivan was still wearing the same slovenly clothes he had on at the racetrack that day, with a toothpick in his mouth, looking at the camera. "We meet again, thief." Tony frowned and immediately ordered, "Search his address and background, Jarvis." "Yes, sir." Ivan's voice continued, "At the Stark Enterprises Expo tomorrow night, I will destroy everything you have. Years ago, your father stole my father's research. Do you know how my father spent his last moments?" Ivan grew more agitated as he spoke. "Your thief of a father certainly doesn't know, and you won't either." After venting to the camera, Ivan spat out the toothpick in his mouth and slowly calmed down. He then adopted an expression of everything being under control. "But all of that will change tomorrow. What you stole back then will turn to dust tomorrow night. I want you to feel my father's despair too. That kind of unbearable pain of losing everything will slowly appear in your heart tomorrow night and stay with you for the rest of your life." At this point, Ivan's emotions also stabilized. "Of course, if you can live until tomorrow. Death by palladium poisoning is enough to settle the hatred in my heart." Ivan looked at the camera. "It's just a pity that I can't let you personally taste the pain for the rest of your life." As the last sentence finished, the entire recording abruptly ended. Seeing the recording end, Tony's mood was as calm as still water. He wanted to laugh. Palladium poisoning? Sorry, he had already solved it. As for Ivan's claim that he wanted to make him feel pain, Tony felt utterly disdainful. Just the day before yesterday, he had already experienced it. Under Su Xing's persuasion, Tony successfully tasted that despair. Not only himself, but he couldn't even protect those around him. He even thought that even if he followed Su Xing's standards completely, he wasn't sure what S.H.I.E.L.D would do. And the most crucial point was that regarding threatening him, S.H.I.E.L.D had genuinely presented plans that could threaten him. What did you have? Compared to Su Xing's skilled threats, Ivan's few threats felt like a petty thug encountering a master criminal in the criminal world. The sense of oppression it gave was not deep, to say the least, but rather, there was none at all. Tony helplessly covered his forehead. Ever since he became Iron Man, the troubles that followed had indeed grown more and more numerous. If he had known this, he would have adopted S.H.I.E.L.D's suggestion to hide his Iron Man identity. However, even though Tony found Ivan's threat childish, strategically, he did not relax his guard against Ivan. "Jarvis, have you found out his background?" "The signal is blocked, sir. But based on the relevant scenes, a general scenario has been outlined based on the relevant information. You can choose as needed." Looking at the many addresses Jarvis listed, Tony had a bit of a headache. Even if Ivan didn't have enough time, according to the intelligence provided by Su Xing, he should have mastered these corresponding reactor technologies. With these things, no one could say what kind of destruction he could cause. After a moment of silence, Tony also began to act. "Jarvis, I'll set up the experiment process, since the new element has been extracted. Then the suit should also be updated." "Receive." With Jarvis's high-tech voice echoing in his ears, Tony began to work diligently. Although he didn't know Ivan's plan. But the most urgent thing now was to prioritize replacing the energy source. As for the harm caused by Ivan, once the new suit was researched and completed, then he would have confidence. And with Tony's research, a night passed. The next morning, at the entrance of Tony's mansion, a doorbell rang. Happy, who was sleeping on the living room sofa, yawned and sat up from the sofa. Twisting his sore neck, Happy patted his face to wake himself up. Hearing the movement at the door, Happy felt a little confused. It wasn't very early. Who would come looking for Tony at this time? With confusion, Happy quickly walked to the door and began to talk through the intercom. Hello? Who is this? A familiar voice came from outside the door. It's me, Happy. Hearing this voice, Happy completely woke up. He was too familiar with this voice. Because of him, Tony made him rummage through the trash can at the racetrack for half a day, and even the cleaning staff got overtime pay, but he didn't get a single cent. What's more, that day's destructive scene, which almost destroyed the entire top floor of the mansion, seemed to also have Su Xing's shadow. And just yesterday, that bizarre reality, somewhat beyond a dream, also involved Su Xing. After this series of events, Happy could almost draw a conclusion. As long as Su Xing came over, some inexplicable dangerous event would definitely happen. The most crucial point was that these dangerous events would always end with him getting injured. At the entrance of Tony's mansion, feeling the silence in the mansion, Su Xing was a little strange and called out again. It's me, Su. You should remember me, right? Happy. On the other end, Happy's face turned red. Listening to Su Xing's urging at the door, he stammered in reply. Sorry, I have to ask the boss's opinion first. With that, Happy immediately contacted Tony. For convenience, Happy directly called Tony. In the lab, Jarvis's voice sounded. You have a new incoming call. Tony, who had been busy all night, straightened his back. Connected. Happy's slightly anxious voice came from the other side. Sir, someone is looking for you. Tony frowned. This wasn't like Happy's usual reporting habit. Feeling Happy's tone, Tony already had a vague guess in his heart. Who? Agent Su Xing from S.H.I.E.L.D. Him. On the other side. Happy, standing at the door, held the phone with both hands, listening to Tony's voice on the other end. He still dares to come over? Hearing Tony's emotional words, Happy felt as if he had been granted a great pardon, and he didn't care what Tony said next. He immediately spoke into the microphone. I'm very sorry, Agent. Sir wants you to leave. It was a bright, sunny day in the peaceful New York City. And at the entrance of the Playboy, Iron Man, Tony Stark's mansion, stood a well-dressed man of extraordinary temperament. Su Xing, standing at the door, scratched his head as he listened to Happy's voice through the earpiece. Tony refusing his entry? It seemed the matter was more difficult than he had imagined. Really? Is that what Mr. Stark means? Happy on the other side of the door immediately replied. Yes, I can confirm it. The boss really doesn't want you to come in. If you have anything to say, you can say it outside the door. I will relay everything. Just then, Tony's voice inconveniently came from the other end of the phone. Happy, let him in. Boss. Listening to Tony's reply, Happy stammered to finish his sentence. Happy held the phone with both hands, his expression on the verge of tears. Let him in? He had just told him not to come, so what did that make him? Falsely reporting military intelligence. Happy moved his face away from the microphone and quickly spoke into the phone. Boss, do you really want to let him in? In the laboratory on the other end. Hearing Happy's nervous tone, Tony once again shifted his attention from his research. What? Is there a problem? Happy's voice echoed through the laboratory via the speakers. Right now, there doesn't seem to be any major problem, sir. But it seems every time a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent comes looking for us, the outcome isn't great. I'm afraid. Don't worry, Happy. Tony stopped his work, clapped his hands, and looked at the screen in front of him. His appearance won't bring anything. It's like detectives always show up at murder scenes. You can't say the detective brought death, can you? At the main entrance. Happy held his phone, somewhat hesitant. From the other end of the phone came Tony's unquestionable voice. Have him wait for me in the living room. I also have something I need to talk to him about. Hearing Tony's request, Happy closed his eyes in despair. God knows how he had managed to get through these past few days. He had just managed to get a good night's sleep, and before he could even catch his breath, Su Xing was here again. After some struggle, Happy resignedly opened his eyes and put his face back to the microphone. And at the entrance of Tony's mansion, Su Xing was frowning, communicating with Black Widow. This mission might be a bit difficult. Tony seems to be quite deeply hurt by me. At S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters on the other side, with several devices set up in front of her, Black Widow, providing off-site support, looked at the message from Su Xing, a hint of helplessness on her beautiful face. Are you sure that's just a bit deep? After such a farce, the fact that Su Xing could still appear normally at the main entrance of Tony's mansion was already far beyond Black Widow's expectations. Looking at Su Xing's message on the screen, Black Widow typed out a few letters. Encountering any difficulties? Tony won't even let me into his house now. Oh, wait a minute, I'm in. Everything's going smoothly so far. Seeing Su Xing's reply, Black Widow clenched her hand into a fist and lightly tapped her forehead. This was why she didn't particularly like to inquire too much about Su Xing's actions. This was a mission. What kind of decent person would use the communication system as a chat tool? Couldn't he be a little more professional? In front of the screen, Black Widow struggled to keep her eyes open. If it weren't for Su Xing causing such a huge mess and Director Fury's specific instructions, she would never have done this. Proceed as planned, Su. At this moment, at the entrance of Tony's mansion, Su Xing lowered his head, finished replying to Black Widow's message, and walked into the mansion. Seeing Happy standing at the door, Su Xing showed a kind smile. In contrast, Happy's expression looked very tired. Please come in. Mr. Stark is waiting for you in the living room. Seeing Happy's unusual state, Su Xing was a bit puzzled, so he joked. What? Is overtime too tiring? Happy, however, displayed the superb professionalism of a personal bodyguard, his face returning to its usual expression. He walked and communicated with Su Xing at the same time. Please understand, Agent, no one wants a doctor knocking on their door. I'm just considering Mr. Stark's safety. Listening to Happy's explanation, Su Xing was at a loss for words for a moment. He had been very confused by Happy's change in tone earlier. No wonder. So Happy thought his identity as an agent coming to the door was bad luck. Thinking of this, Su Xing felt a slight sense of apology internally. Don't worry, Happy. This time I'm looking for Tony purely to help him prepare for the upcoming crisis. Looking at Su Xing, who had already sat down under his guidance, Happy nodded. I hope so. Please wait a moment, Mr. Stark will be right here. Then he turned and left. Meanwhile, at a corner on the second floor of the mansion, Tony was secretly watching Su Xing sitting in the living room. Looking at Su Xing's figure, Tony quietly said, Jarvis, aim all weapons and surveillance at him. All preparations have been completed according to your command. Hearing Jarvis's reply, Tony nodded with satisfaction, then patted himself down and tidied his clothes. He slowly walked down the stairs towards Su Xing. But internally, Tony was slightly puzzled. What he had told Happy earlier was true. He did indeed have something to discuss with Su Xing this time. Regarding Su Xing, Tony really didn't know how to interact with him. He had lied to him, tricked him into rebelling, but from another perspective, with his abilities, he shouldn't have failed so easily, right? At least he shouldn't have made such a big mistake, discussing usurping power in front of the current director of S.H.I.E.L.D. On the other hand, the tesseract that Su Xing provided him was indeed extremely valuable. Although Director Fury had reacted strongly when he first found out about it. But at that time, Tony had not yet fully begun his research. And Tony had merely dismissed Director Fury's reaction as a makeshift show. After all, he didn't even know if the information had leaked, so how could this thing be good? Until now. Through overnight research, based on the successfully extracted new elements, the tesseract directly overturned Tony's understanding. At the same time, Tony became even more confused by S.H.I.E.L.D's performance. Now there were only two options facing him. Either all of this was just S.H.I.E.L.D's plan, or S.H.I.E.L.D was simply lucky. All the data on the Tesseract had already been stolen, but due to technical reasons, the spies hadn't been able to fully decipher the energy contained within. Looking at Su Xing's approaching smile, Tony sighed internally. Honestly, he truly hoped it wasn't the second option. At S.H.I.E.L.D, Black Widow, who was responsible for providing off-site technical support, routinely sent a message to Su Xing. How far along is the mission? Soon, Black Widow received Su Xing's reply. Everything is normal. I've already started talking with Tony. Everything is proceeding according to plan. Seeing Su Xing's reply, Black Widow did not dare to let her guard down. Everything proceeding according to plan? Who knows? Black Widow's fingers flew across the keyboard. I hope so. If anything happens outside of the plan, contact me immediately. Meanwhile, at Tony's mansion, looking at the message from Black Widow, Su Xing, who had secretly replied, looked pained. Hadn't he just heard Happy say that exact same thing? Why were they both so uneasy about his actions? Su Xing felt a bit helpless, then looked up towards where Tony had come down from. Although he didn't know what Tony had been secretly watching him from the second floor and planning. But none of that mattered. This mission was about sincerity for sincerity, absolutely no tricks. So Su Xing politely stood up and gave Tony a very polite smile. However, before Su Xing could speak, Tony stopped not far from him. I've directed all surveillance towards you. I hope you'll behave yourself this time. Looking at Tony's reaction, Su Xing's smile remained very sincere. Please rest assured, Tony, I am absolutely here for your good this time. Yesterday's meeting at the restaurant was just a ruse. Its purpose was for the director to get to know you. I hope you both left a deep impression. Tony narrowed his eyes. As for what happened yesterday afternoon, he did leave with something. But it wasn't a deep impression, it was a very severe psychological trauma. Meanwhile, at S.H.I.E.L.D itself, Black Widow listened to Su Xing and Tony's conversation, feeling a slight inability to hold back her emotions. Having worked with Su Xing for many years, she had never understood one thing. With Su Xing's conversational skills, how did he pass S.H.I.E.L.D's review? Even the Red Room, where she had trained, conducted a considerable amount of conversation training for them. These human weapons used for various deadly missions. Otherwise, with only combat prowess, they would be unable to infiltrate. As for Su Xing's conversation skills, Black Widow was already too lazy to complain. In his mind, he probably thought stealth missions meant killing everyone to achieve some level of stealth requirement. And on the other side, Tony stood opposite Su Xing and snapped his fingers. Happy immediately appeared and placed a metal box in front of Su Xing. Under Su Xing's puzzled gaze, Tony explained, It's not that I don't trust you, pal. But my heart has already suffered physical damage, and I don't want it to suffer mental damage because of you again. So please, like last time, put everything in and show some sincerity. On the other end, listening to Tony's words, Black Widow raised an eyebrow. This situation was very familiar. She had already made corresponding plans. Tony wanting to check was expected and perfectly reasonable. In the mansion, Su Xing's face still maintained a friendly smile, not feeling at all offended by Tony's action. Of course. You can do whatever you want, Tony. Saying that, Su Xing pulled out various pieces of equipment from his clothing pockets and placed them in the metal box. Under Tony's slightly twitching gaze, Su Xing quickly filled the metal box. Looking at Su Xing's equipment, Tony and Happy were both a bit shocked. Folding tools, miniature listening devices, a bunch of colorful, mysterious potions whose purpose was unknown. Just these would have been fine. But what were the rest of these things? Home appliance discount coupons, hot dog stand loyalty cards. Seeing their strange expressions, Su Xing took it as a matter of course. As an agent, I also have my own life. Besides, without these, I wouldn't be able to carry out stealth missions. Noticing Happy's questioning gaze, Tony waved his hand. Take it away. Under Happy's determined gaze, these items were carried away from the spot. Meanwhile, at S.H.I.E.L.D., Black Widow breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, they had planned this beforehand. It was precisely for this reason that their communication had not been discovered. And just then, Tony's voice rang out again. Anything else? Black Widow's heart immediately tensed. Anything else? Wasn't that enough? Had the communication device been discovered? On the other end, in the living room, Tony again had Happy bring over another metal box. To be honest, Tony didn't really believe Su Xing could still be hiding anything at this point. After all, these items perfectly matched Su Xing's unreliable nature. But then again, what if? Tony knew clearly that dealing with Su Xing meant not following common sense. Otherwise, he would definitely suffer a loss. And just as Black Widow and Tony were engaged in an intense internal struggle, Su Xing spoke calmly. You're impossible. After saying that, Su Xing turned and pulled out some more clinking and clanking equipment and placed it in the metal box. Tony's mouth twitched. Sure enough, there was still more. And on the other end, Black Widow's eyes showed tension. This wasn't right. They hadn't anticipated this situation. What else had Su Xing taken out? And in the mansion, looking at Tony's suspicious gaze, Su Xing was a bit helpless. There's really nothing left. If you're still not at ease, then I'll just have to take off my clothes. After considering the items in the two metal boxes, Tony stopped there. Happy walked forward, holding the metal boxes, ready to leave. Just then, Su Xing called out to the departing Happy. Be careful, there's a miniature bomb inside. It'll explode if the pressure isn't right. Hearing this, Happy's steps immediately halted. He looked at Tony, then showed a look of resignation, carrying the metal boxes away. Black Widow on the other side was very confused. When did the armory update its equipment? Su Xing's reply came. No update. The bomb thing was just me bluffing. Those are just small pebbles I picked up in the park for skipping stones. At this moment, watching Happy leave with a look of resignation, Tony also breathed a sigh of relief and sat down opposite Su Xing. This action itself wasn't meant to thoroughly search Su Xing for equipment. Tony knew that if Su Xing truly wanted to hide something, there was nothing he could do. Besides, Su Xing wasn't obligated to do so. This action was simply to test Su Xing's sincerity. And apart from that, the instruments in those two boxes were genuinely unusable. Seeing Tony sit down, willing to talk, Su Xing no longer wasted words and spoke directly. My purpose in coming here is very simple, to warn you. Ivan has been released and is currently preparing a series of major actions to destroy you. On the other side, at S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters, Black Widow breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, to the main point. According to the plan, Tony should be very worried, and they could gain Tony's trust by helping him resolve this incident. With Black Widow's hopeful anticipation, Tony's reply came from over there. Oh, inside S.H.I.E.L.D. Listening to Tony's voice, Black Widow was a little puzzled. Oh, your personal safety is completely in the other party's hands now. Shouldn't you be scared? Black Widow frowned and spoke to the screen. Su, what does he mean by this? Did you say something to him behind S.H.I.E.L.D.'s back again? At the same time, Su Xing, who was sitting in front of Tony, looked bewildered. Say what? God bless, I didn't say anything this time. I swear on my professional ethics. Black Widow on the other side shivered. Then after a few seconds of silence, she said, I don't think your professional ethics can be used as a guarantee. Su Xing, sitting opposite Tony, was indeed a bit confused. Ignoring Black Widow's complaint, he looked at Tony, who had a calm expression, feeling a little perplexed. Why does every plan turn out differently from what he expects? Su Xing nodded, indicating agreement. Then he stated with great confidence, May I ask why? Tony poured a glass of red wine and cleared his throat. Why what? Looking at Tony's calm demeanor, Su Xing became even more puzzled. Could it be that, as he thought, this world was still crazy? Maybe I wasn't clear. But this matter concerns your life's safety. Tony raised an eyebrow and placed the wine glass on the table. Life safety. I don't think he can pose any life threat to me. Listening to Tony's calm words, Su Xing couldn't help but recall Tony's early narcissistic bad habit. Thinking of this, Su Xing took a breath and understood the current situation. Narcissism is good. At least he wasn't going crazy. Otherwise, wouldn't this world be completely ruined? Then wouldn't he become the one to save the world? On this universe stage, that is Marvel Earth, he didn't want to expose his strength too early. No way. This guy is naturally steady. Seeing that Tony wasn't afraid at all, Su Xing felt it was his responsibility to emphasize it to Tony. According to the original movie plot, Tony and Rhodes, unprepared, barely managed to subdue Ivan. Although he now had his help, the situation had an extra layer of assurance. But he still didn't want to take risks. If Tony really had an accident, it would be a big deal. So Su Xing adjusted his expression, making his tone sound as serious as possible. Listen, Tony, I know I usually like to make jokes. But this time, on this matter, I am very serious. Tony swirled his wine glass, directly interrupting Su Xing's conversation. You were just as serious when you pulled me into rebelling against S.H.I.E.L.D. last time. Before was before, now is now. This time it's really different. Tony tilted his head. Do you have any evidence? As soon as this sentence came out, Su Xing immediately perked up. Putting everything else aside, providing evidence was S.H.I.E.L.'s specialty. As a senior agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., he was extremely proficient in covert operations. Under Tony's gaze, Su Xing smiled confidently and pulled out several photos of Ivan and Hammer from his pocket. Looking at these photos, Su Xing slowly said, "This is information our agents obtained based on clues. I think these are enough to solve your trust issues, Tony." Listening to Su Xing's words, Tony picked up the photos, glanced at them, then casually placed them on the table, his tone full of distrust. How can I be sure this isn't another one of your schemes? As an agent, it's quite simple for you to forge things, isn't it? Listening to Tony's voice through the microphone, Black Widow looked speechless. What terrible thing did Su Xing do to make Tony distrust S.H.I.E.L.D. so much? What exactly did you do back then? On the other side, hearing Black Widow's accusation through his invisible earpiece, Su Xing's heart tightened. Black Widow was nominally his partner now. But in reality, she was completely Fury's spy sent to monitor him. At this point, he didn't want to give Fury any more leverage. So Su Xing immediately employed the conflict-shifting method. Aren't we on the same side now? Tony completely distrusts us. How are we going to proceed with our plan? Listening to Su Xing's reply, Black Widow no longer dwelled on the topic. Fury wanted her to supervise Su Xing. She was naturally willing to get to the bottom of these issues. But the key was, she didn't want to partner with Su Xing anymore. If he could pull off something like this now, who knows what kind of incident he might drag her into next time. She was indeed on the same side, to some extent, as Su Xing said. Ending this mission as soon as possible would be good for both of them. With this thought, Black Widow spoke into the microphone. Show him some video footage. I'll send it to you now. Hearing Black Widow's reply in his earpiece, Su Xing on the other side said to Tony, "If you don't believe me, I can provide more video footage. Of course, the premise is that you return the receiving equipment from that metal box to me." Tony stared fixedly at Su Xing. That joke of yours is better than before. It seems that after being around me for so long, you've still learned a lot of my charisma. Let me guess, did that female agent like you a little more because of me? Listening to Tony's narcissistic and teasing words, Su Xing fell silent for a moment. Tony looked fine. He was still the same as before. Then why was he so oblivious to this news? However, Su Xing immediately breathed a sigh of relief. No matter what, at least Tony's current mental state was quite good. This at least proved that the future world wouldn't deviate to an extremely absurd position. With this guaranteed, Everything else could be considered minor matters. Directly opposite Su Xing. Looking at Su Xing's silence, Tony felt very pleased. No matter what, he finally had a chance to make him eat humble pie. Didn't he want to recruit him into S.H.I.E.L.D? Then he just wouldn't join. As for S.H.I.E.L.D, he would provide all support in terms of substantial help. Tony's attitude towards S.H.I.E.L.D was originally primarily cooperative. As for the title of joining or not joining, he didn't really care much about it. Having it was fine, it didn't really mean anything. But coincidentally, this was Su Xing's mission. Since this was Su Xing's goal, he absolutely could not accept it. Tony stretched, crossed his legs, and said to Su Xing, who was in difficulty before him, "Don't trouble that sexy lady with this kind of thing, Su. Besides, with the receiver isolated, she can't send it over anyway." With that, Tony snapped his fingers. "Jarvis, play Ivan's video." "Yes, sir." Under Su Xing's somewhat surprised gaze, Ivan's threatening video to Tony began to play. "I will make you feel the humiliation my father once endured. Right at the Stark Enterprises Expo, I will show you everything." The video finished playing, automatically closing and deleting itself. Looking at Ivan's fierce expression in the video, Su Xing reacted quite strongly. Such blatant weaponry. Such a vicious demeanor. Such a threatening video. It was a little funny. Of course, it wasn't that he looked down on Ivan. If it were when he had just transmigrated, he would have been very afraid of an opponent of Ivan's caliber. After all, he was someone who could exchange a few blows with Tony and Rhodes. Although he did launch a sneak attack. But then, how could that not be considered a regrettable defeat in a 1 versus 2? If he had directly faced him right after transmigrating, then his and Ivan's win rate, with the Captain America Serum's enhancement, should have triggered a passive ability. No matter how heaven-defying whiplash Ivan's close-quarters combat ability and high-tech weapons were, he could only barely go toe-to-toe with the opponent, relying on the Captain America Serum. But now, sorry. With Platinum Star, dealing with an opponent like Ivan, relying on the ability of invincible first strike and guaranteed first strike. This kind of matchup could only be described as toying. Not to mention Su Xing's now masterful combat skills and tactical thinking. Thus, in Su Xing's current view, Ivan's threat truly lacked any ferocity, leaving only amusement. However, on the other hand, his not being afraid didn't mean Tony wasn't afraid. In the original movie plot, Ivan also sent a challenge to Tony in advance. And Tony, being in the open, truly suffered a silent loss. He didn't look invincible at all. Su Xing glanced at Tony. So where did his confidence come from? It couldn't have been given by God, could it? As for Tony, after the video finished playing, he turned his head and looked at Su Xing. "What are your thoughts?" Su Xing shrugged. "Sorry, we didn't know you had already received his video, due to your hostility. However, on the other hand, we did inform him that he was connected to Hammer. I don't know if that helped you." Tony turned his head away, patted the clean sleeve of his right arm, and then said indifferently, "Actually, I had already deduced that. But..." Tony smiled at Su Xing. "This time, it's still S.H.I.E.L.D's credit. After all, I don't particularly need it." Su Xing smiled politely. "All right. Whatever you say is right. Don't pretend with me, Su." Tony seemed a bit tired, resting his head on the sofa. "Tell me honestly, how do you feel? Do you feel your life is threatened?" Tony stood up as he spoke. He stood up under Su Xing's somewhat bewildered gaze. "This isn't even as big as your threat." Hearing Tony's words, not to mention Black Widow, even Su Xing was a little moved. Su Xing tried to organize his words. "You mean the threat posed by S.H.I.E.L.D. is even greater than his?" Tony directly interrupted Su Xing's words. "No, that's not it. What I mean is, the harm he caused me simply cannot compare to what you caused," Tony said through gritted teeth. "To be precise, it's nowhere near." Listening to their conversation, Black Widow on the other side was even more astonished. Looking at the automatically saved conversation log, Black Widow even hesitated whether to tamper with it. Otherwise, the damage these things caused Su Xing was too great. As a partner for this mission, she felt it was necessary to tamper with it for the successful completion of the mission. But at the same time, Black Widow's heart still couldn't stop sighing. What on earth did Su Xing do to make Tony hate him so much? Under these circumstances, Fury still insisted on having Su Xing carry out this recruitment. Honestly, Black Widow had secretly complained in private. Having Su Xing carry out this mission was worse than having Ivan, who wielded strange weapons, try to persuade him. Although Ivan was Tony's sworn enemy. But then again, wasn't Su Xing currently? Since it was already like this, then it might as well be Ivan. At least her execution would be somewhat interesting. And on the other end, after saying the above, Tony no longer wasted words. Instead, he snapped his fingers and called out, "Happy, send the agent's equipment back. I think I've discussed enough with this gentleman today." After speaking, he didn't give Su Xing time to react, turning and leaving. This meeting was the attitude he conveyed to S.H.I.E.L.D. Cooperation was fine, joining was not. When encountering problems, he would choose to share them with S.H.I.E.L.D., using S.H.I.E.L.D.'s power to help him handle things. But on the other hand, he would absolutely not be a part of S.H.I.E.L.D. The biggest difference between these two was the issue of initiative. All missions would be determined by him as to whether they were righteous and could be participated in. And the other reason was very simple. The new element had just been researched. Now was the time to strike while the iron was hot and quickly put an end to this research. If it weren't for exchanging information about Ivan, he actually didn't want to interrupt his research for this. In Tony's mansion, in the living room, looking at Tony's departing back, Su Xing had a helpless expression. No matter how much he calculated, he never calculated this step today. Who would have thought that his actions would unintentionally raise the bar for villains in Tony's mind? Now, that was good. Ivan, who originally had a weak presence among villains, was now completely untraceable. With things developing to this point, even Su Xing was a bit troubled. He couldn't be blamed for this. When he was executing that plan, he never thought there would be such a day. No matter how he operated, he couldn't resist the fact that Fury was a tricky old man. Just then, Happy carefully carried 2 metal boxes and placed them in front of Su Xing. "These are your things, agent." While putting on his equipment, Su Xing pondered the next course of action. According to Tony, he now seemed not to rule out cooperating with S.H.I.E.L.D. Logically speaking, from a practical effect, this was no different from having already achieved the mission. But the key to the matter was one point. Fury and the system wouldn't accept it either. After all, Fury's mission objective for him was to successfully recruit Tony, not to establish a cooperative relationship. There could absolutely be no outsiders in the Avengers initiative. To join this initiative, Tony must become a member of S.H.I.E.L.D. This way, Fury could also report to the World Security Council. Thinking of this, Su Xing glanced at Tony's back. "I believe one day you will change your mind." Very soon, under the bright sunlight, New York City was a scene of joy and harmony. If it weren't for frequently being the center of various world-destroying events, it might truly be considered every country kid's favorite international metropolis. But reality has no if. At this moment, inside a luxurious villa, a transaction was taking place in Iron Man Tony's home. S.H.I.E.L.D., a secret organization that ordinary people might never encounter in their lifetime, was currently dispatching an agent to recruit Tony. If the two could form an alliance, it would change many major negative events in the future. Of course, if their discussion wasn't so awkward. But reality has no if. Inside the villa, Tony, dressed in a formal suit, had one foot on the stairs. After hearing Su Xing's words, he turned his head. Looking at the smile on Su Xing's lips, Tony always felt that the smile was very playful. Seeing this scene, Tony, who had dealt with Su Xing many times, was inexplicably startled. This wasn't truly because Tony was overtly afraid of Su Xing. With his armor, Tony was very confident in his combat power. What's wrong with casually deflecting bullets? No matter how strong your human body is, can it compare to a machine's limit? The reason Tony was annoyed by Su Xing's demeanor was precisely because this kid Su Xing didn't play by the rules. The tricks he played on him were one more devious than the last. Meeting Su Xing's dark pupils, Tony's hand gripping the handrail unconsciously tightened. Tony, feeling very uncomfortable under Su Xing's gaze, didn't hold back and spoke directly. What? Is this how S.H.I.E.L.D. recruits? Standing on the stairs, Tony pointed down at Su Xing. I'm telling you, the subordinates you recruit with this method will never be loyal. Looking at the intensely reacting Tony, Su Xing, somewhat confused, quickly waved his hands. Oh my goodness. He didn't expect himself to have caused Tony such a great psychological shadow. Under Happy's wary gaze, Su Xing took off some of his equipment and placed them in a metal box. Calm down, Tony. I just want to, make a deal. A deal? Tony's voice stretched with confusion. Su Xing nodded. You used to be a businessman, Tony, and of course, you still are, but you've become more conscientious. So, perhaps we can make a deal? Listening to Su Xing's words, Tony really couldn't hold back. A deal? Are you talking about like last time? I think I'll just refuse. At this moment, Black Widow, who had been listening in the entire time, also spoke to Su Xing from the other side. I believe threatening Tony is not S.H.I.E.L.D's intention, Su. Naturally, nor is it the director's intention. Facing such a situation, Black Widow's answer, on the surface, was a conversation with Su Xing. But after Tony already knew the content of their conversation, these two sentences were more about stating a position. Black Widow on the other side had a serious yet somewhat helpless expression. Nick Fury asking her to supervise Su Xing. This action truly seemed necessary. Otherwise, with Su Xing's task method of not being able to cook well and directly blowing up the boiler, she was truly afraid that S.H.I.E.L.D. would never complete this task of recruiting Tony. Black Widow frowned. Can't this scoundrel just let me have an easier time? And on the other side, feeling the hostility from those around him, Su Xing immediately offered reassurance. Stop, everyone. I don't mean to threaten you, Tony. Looking at Tony's distrustful face and Happy's wary movements, Su Xing felt a headache. Oh dear. Why does everyone imagine him to be so bad? Is he, Su Xing, the kind of person who uses professional convenience to achieve tasks through various threats? Oh. Actually, he is. But Su Xing himself also felt a bit helpless. If he didn't try his best to maintain the future world line, he wouldn't have to resort to such desperate measures every time. Before his strength grew, he truly didn't want to make a move. If he had a choice, he would also want to solve problems through some milder methods. The martial world isn't all about fighting and killing. It's all about human relationships. This principle naturally applies in the Marvel world, which is full of technology and magic. Since the world line is currently at a relatively normal level, he can also adopt some milder methods. It's just a hint of helplessness seeped from the depths of Su Xing's heart. He still had the device that allowed him to communicate with Black Widow at any time in his ear. To put it nicely, this thing is called communication. To put it bluntly, this is monitoring. And this information, he didn't want S.H.I.E.L.D. to know. Su Xing sighed imperceptibly, then put away the formulaic smile that might have seemed a bit strange to Tony, and said to Tony, I just want to talk about you providing weapons to S.H.I.E.L.D. Hearing Su Xing's words, Tony frowned. This topic jumped a bit too fast, didn't it? Weapons provision? But then he noticed Su Xing's winks and nudges, hinting him to look at his hand tapping rhythmically on the sofa. Realizing, Tony immediately spoke in a voice only he could hear. Jarvis, decrypt the code, mute. As Tony's command was given, a blue screen randomly appeared behind Su Xing, displaying a sentence. Secret transaction. At the same time, Su Xing's voice was incredibly sincere. That's right. I know you don't want to join S.H.I.E.L.D. and be supervised. I completely understand that. After all, who wants to be forced to do something they don't want to do? But we can also have some other cooperation. On the other side, looking at the still unrecovered video equipment, Black Widow felt a bit annoyed internally. Due to Tony's shielding device, she couldn't see what was happening over there at all. Currently, she could only judge how the mission was progressing through sound. When she heard Su Xing's words, Black Widow showed no ripple. These talking points were also the result of yesterday's discussion. If Tony simply refused to be under S.H.I.E.L.D., then this method was also a success. At this moment, in the villa, identifying Su Xing's meaning, Tony's hand also tapped a letter on the handrail. Speak. At the same time, Tony also replied aloud. I guess you don't read the news much, do you? Stark Enterprises has already abandoned the arms market. I don't think S.H.I.E.L.D. wouldn't know this, right? As Su Xing moved, several words appeared on the screen. Looking at the words that were pieced together, Tony's pupils involuntarily widened for a moment. Of course I know that, but we are not terrorists. The weapons you provide us, we will use them for the right things. The fragments in your body, I can solve them. As noon approached, the bright sunlight became somewhat scorching. Under the excellent geographical selection, Tony's villa shimmered under the sun's rays. It gave off a feeling that the master of the house was at his peak. And inside the villa, Happy was very surprised by the changes before him. Sure enough, he guessed correctly. Su Xing, in S.H.I.E.L.D., was not an agent who played by the rules. Once he appeared, Tony would be drawn into all sorts of strange things. But Happy had been with Tony long enough. Facing such a situation, after a brief moment of shock, Happy also reacted. He quietly stayed aside and stopped speaking. At the corner of the stairs between the first and second floors, Tony looked at the words on the screen and was briefly surprised. I can solve the shrapnel in your chest. This deal? Tony's gaze towards Su Xing couldn't help but carry a few more hints of suspicion. The biggest reason he needed the arc reactor was that the shrapnel in his chest could not be completely removed at present. Without the reactor's support, this shrapnel would slowly penetrate deeper into his heart. Ultimately, it would cause irreversible damage to his heart. This was a clever idea he had found ingenious during his initial research. But when he personally became the weapon's victim, Tony also experienced the suffocating feeling firsthand. However, how did Su Xing know this information? He wasn't present when Tony was injured. Besides, even if he were present, how could he identify his injury at a glance? Tony's mind was a bit chaotic at the moment. There was a bit too much information in that sentence all at once. But more than that, it was another kind of suspicion. Facing Su Xing's words, Tony simply didn't bother to move and said directly, anyone can say something like that. Regarding this, I highly doubt S.H.I.E.L.D. would have such self-control. Listening to Tony's reply, Su Xing also understood Tony's unspoken meaning. You say you can solve the problem in my chest? Why should I believe you? Facing Tony's reaction, Su Xing was unhurried, then stopped his actions and continued Tony's words, saying, I think we can prove this with time. If you can give us. I'm sorry, I can't. Tony directly interrupted Su Xing's conversation. Then, the screen behind Su Xing also automatically disappeared. Standing on the stairs, Tony refused very smoothly. If it were in the cave, he would still be very interested in this proposal. But in New York City, this problem seemed somewhat insignificant. To say the least, Tony had already discovered alternative factors with no side effects. Su Xing's proposal held very little attraction at this moment. Furthermore, why should he trust Su Xing? Tony's eyes showed disdain. Let Su Xing perform surgery on him? Could this world be any more absurd? Even if Su Xing could, he was genuinely afraid that Su Xing would just clock out and run away in the middle of it. At that time, he couldn't just stand there with his chest exposed, watching his heart beat, waiting for him to come back to work tomorrow, could he? After a series of torments by Su Xing, Tony was very sure that such an outrageous thing was not at all out of character for Su Xing. It even had a certain rationality. If Su Xing didn't run away then, Tony would find it a bit strange. Not to mention, he didn't lack highly skilled doctors. Just for superb surgical skills, he knew the famous Dr. Ethan recommended to him. Not to mention his private physician. So Tony decisively rejected Su Xing's deal. Time is a very precious thing. I can't verify it until S.H.I.E.L.D. is disbanded, can I? With this time, I can completely trust myself to save many lives. With that, Tony no longer bothered with Su Xing and turned to leave. Watching his back, Su Xing shrugged. He put all the equipment back on himself. On the other side, in S.H.I.E.L.D., Black Widow looked at the relit image and breathed a sigh of relief. Having put on his gear, Su Xing nodded to Happy. Well then, see you again sometime, Happy. Happy looked at Su Xing with complicated eyes. Please no. I don't really want to see you. There will be a chance in the future, Agent. Accompanied by Happy, Su Xing walked towards the door. After stepping out of the door, Su Xing twisted his neck, relaxing a bit. And just then, Tony's voice suddenly rang out from the doorway. The main road is quite safe, Su. When you're off work and have nothing to do, you can go play on the highway more often. If you don't find it exciting enough, I can tell you a few highways with less traffic, and you can go experience them there too. Hearing the voice suddenly coming from behind him, Su Xing's movements stiffened for a moment. Then he shook his head and left Tony's villa entrance directly. He didn't know why, but he just felt that Tony at this moment was so much like an elementary school student. He just didn't know if it applied to American elementary school students. While complaining, Su Xing got into the specialized car and drove away. And just at this moment, Black Widow's voice rang in his ear again. What were you doing just now? Facing Black Widow's question, Su Xing smoothly replied, busy selling my soul through work to earn the capital to buy it back when I'm not working. Listening to Su Xing's words, Black Widow was genuinely stunned for a moment. After reacting, Black Widow was truly speechless. Hey. You're still on duty. Do you know all this will be submitted to Fury? Just a second ago, you were talking about work. How did you start talking about getting off work the next second? And it was quite philosophical. Is that your definition of agent work? Looking at Black Widow, whom he had led astray, Su Xing's lips curled into a smile. As a seasoned agent, he naturally knew that Black Widow was suspecting him. After all, the operational space she gave him just now was very large. Tony's refusal was actually within his expectations. If he hadn't guessed wrong, Tony's mental journey might have been exactly as he had deduced. He certainly hadn't intended to recruit Tony into S.H.I.E.L.D. by helping him solve his heart problem. The main purpose of this action was not Tony's heart, but his platinum star. Under what circumstances do two people unconsciously form a connection? When both know a secret that cannot be told. For the current situation, Su Xing could only use this method to bridge the distance between them. If it weren't for special circumstances, he really didn't want to expose Platinum Star. But for the sake of completing the mission, Su Xing could only go all out. Besides, he trusted Tony's character. Tony was definitely not the type to be a tattletale. Of course, he wouldn't say it outright. In New York City, a plain-looking gray car was driving unhurriedly on the road. Smoothly passing through intersections, the car stopped at a traffic light. Seeing the red light, Su Xing obediently stepped on the brake, waiting for the green light. Taking off his headphones, Su Xing turned on the car's communication system, and Black Widow's anxious voice came through. What were you doing just now? Why didn't you answer? Su Xing looked at the displayed map and yawned. I was driving just now. Safety is paramount. No mistakes allowed. Are you serious? Hearing the disdainful voice, Su Xing could imagine Black Widow's face, barely suppressing her anger. I don't think it was safe when you stopped the tank either, so why were you calling me nonstop then? Hearing Black Widow bring up his past, Su Xing felt a little awkward. That's a different matter. Last time was a special situation. It's perfectly normal for me to be scared. Sighing, Black Widow pinched the bridge of her nose and asked the unreliable Su Xing on the other end. Don't change the subject, Su. Tell me, did you really not have any private dealings with Tony Stark? Seeing the red light turn green, Su Xing started the car. He seemed a bit helpless about Black Widow's persistent questioning. It's a bit difficult to do things right under an agent's nose. Even telling a lie requires writing a thesis. Su Xing had carefully considered telling others about Platinum Star. In the future, the world's saviors would definitely fall to the Avengers. For such an organization that represents Earth and directly confronts universe threats, he would definitely have contact with them later. When a major event occurred, Su Xing didn't want to keep hiding his abilities. Instead of covering it up, it would be better to explain it directly, and it would also prevent others from becoming suspicious. Just the enhanced physical fitness had already led to Fury's continuous, subtle investigations. Not to mention a supernatural ability like Platinum Star. And the reason he told Tony was not only because it would be unavoidable in the future. More importantly, as long as he didn't become an open enemy of Tony, Tony would absolutely not reveal Platinum Star to others. Su Xing was too familiar with Tony's personality. People with high IQs often have a strong desire to control things, like Sherlock Holmes. They would absolutely not let go of things they didn't understand. Looking at Tony's experience joining S.H.I.E.L.D., it's clear he questioned S.H.I.E.L.D. The Tesseract was one thing, and more secret grand plans were further proof. Tony was uneasy about so many things being handled by S.H.I.E.L.D. And Su Xing didn't want to be someone Tony secretly guarded against. He didn't want Tony to pull out an anti-Su Xing armor directly in front of him one day. That would be annoying. Through Tony's strong desire for control, Su Xing could completely guarantee that Tony would not tell others. Furthermore, through such a small matter, he could also salvage their precarious relationship. Why not do something so beneficial? As for Black Widow, Su Xing smacked his lips and said, I really didn't do anything, Natasha. You have to believe me, and besides, if it were you in that situation, wouldn't you do the same? If you're so strict, then even if I had no problems, I could still forcefully find some so-called evidence, couldn't I? Hearing Su Xing's reply, in the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters building, Black Widow put down the hand that was pinching her nose, and her expression softened slightly. He could give such an explanation, and it also gave her something to say in front of Fury. On the other side, looking at the location on the map, Su Xing also stopped the car and opened the system panel. The reason he didn't tell Black Widow, to put it plainly, was that he didn't trust Black Widow. This isn't to say that Black Widow's character and values are problematic. Rather, in essence, Black Widow is, after all, a tool person trained by the Red Room. To achieve their goals, they can utilize all available power. Although Black Widow would certainly have control, Su Xing didn't want to take any risks regarding Platinum Star. He really didn't want Black Widow to casually reveal his ability to her teammates one day to deal with him. Then Platinum Star's preemptive ability would disappear. Although Su Xing's mental power has increased with the Super Soldier Serum, Platinum Star's original range was still too short. Even if it was enhanced and the distance improved a bit, that was all. Perhaps one day, when he levels up his mental power to max, this problem can be solved. But for now, Su Xing looked at the points he had accumulated for a long time, and then at the Goro Goro no Mi, glint glint fruit, that still needed 2 days, and he silently sighed. With this outrageous exchange rate of points for currency, he didn't know how long he would have to wait. Su Xing put on his headphones and returned to his resting point, preparing for his next move. And Black Widow's inquiry came through his ear. All right, I can drop this issue. So what do we do next? Packing his things, Su Xing replied naturally. I'm glad you asked, Natasha. Next, we should meet Ivan, who has already been rescued. His revenge plan against Tony Stark has already affected innocent people. Stopping him can also alleviate the relationship with Tony Stark, killing two birds with one stone. On the other end, hearing Su Xing's plan, Black Widow nodded, tacitly approving the plan. What should I do? After changing his gear, Su Xing poured a cup of coffee. Hammer recruited Ivan, probably to have him upgrade the armor technology. Although both sides have some cooperation, Ivan and Hammer's goals are still different. Hammer is just jealous of Tony, while Ivan completely wants his life. Tasting the coffee he brewed, Su Xing summarized. Ivan will definitely tamper with the armor. I hope your skills haven't gotten rusty. Black Widow's voice came from the earpiece. What about you? Su Xing replied. I'm responsible for helping Tony directly resist Ivan. He definitely won't have just this one trick. Go now. No, Hammer will definitely do checks. Directly leaving code is easy to be found out. He probably won't access the armor until the Stark Expo begins. I'll follow on site. You go to Hammer Industries and deal with the armor. After speaking, Su Xing felt a bit helpless. So annoying. This feeling is like you've already read the future content, but to accommodate friends who haven't seen the plot, you can only bite the bullet and find details to hint at. On the other side, in the Triskelion S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters near Washington Square. Hearing Su Xing's arrangements, Black Widow had no objections. Professionally, Su Xing and Black Widow both belonged to agents. But in terms of specific handling, there were still some differences between the two. Su Xing belonged to the Armed Enforcement Department, and his abilities in computer-related aspects were slightly inferior to Black Widow's. After sending the conversation record to Fury, Black Widow rarely smiled. This matter is quite strange. At home, Su Xing put down his coffee cup. Can Ivan be hijacked by Hammer? No. I'm surprised that you can actually come up with a suitable action plan. Let's talk about two different things. Inside Tony's villa. Watching Su Xing get into the car, Tony snorted, his face full of disdain. Jarvis's voice echoed in the laboratory. Sir, your personal attack capabilities still need improvement. Turning off the surveillance at the door, Tony didn't reply to Jarvis and turned to busy himself with work. Jarvis continued. Given your current living situation, my advice is to try not to get angry. Tony didn't even lift his head. If you could give me some help, I don't think I'd get angry either. Request received. Searching for a solution for you. Search complete. Based on your situation, my suggestion is that the next time you see this agent, you can treat him as a private individual. Tony's movements paused. Treat Su Xing as a private individual? When fighting enemies. He's frantically operating, and just as he calls Su Xing for help, Su Xing puts away his knife and says, I'm off work. Then he goes straight back to the cemetery nearby, lifts the lawn, and crawls into a coffin. Thinking of this, Tony quickly shook his head, stopping his fantasy. This would make him relax. But why did he feel even more nervous? Your suggestion is very good, Jarvis. Next time, don't suggest it. Busy with his work, Tony suddenly felt a bit regretful. If only he had known there were so many insulting phrases online. He wouldn't have had to spend time thinking of a sarcastic remark without swear words. What a waste of time. On the other side, at Hammer's factory. Looking at the latest armor developed by Ivan, Hammer's face was practically splitting with laughter. With such an achievement, he would surely be able to thoroughly humiliate Tony at the Stark exhibition, making his words a complete joke. No one can replace your technology within 20 years. But how do I feel that you will be obsolete tonight, my dear Tony? Touching the armor equipped with the latest technology, Hammer excitedly muttered to himself. Then he slapped the armor and instructed the person next to him. Send a set of armor to the military. Let that bastard completely lose the military's trust first. Yes, boss. The secretary beside him took notes and then asked. By the way, boss, the set of armor Colonel Rhodes brought has also arrived. Hearing the secretary's words, Hammer's lips curled into a smile. This set of armor was precisely the one Rhodes had inherited from Tony. Hammer had wanted to reverse engineer its technology at the time. Although Ivan possessed technology no less inferior to Tony's, he couldn't possibly serve Hammer Enterprise indefinitely. With such a sample in hand, he definitely had to study it. But to his disappointment, none of his researchers were able to replicate the technology. Aside from his anger, Hammer also felt somewhat indifferent inside. If they can't, they can't. He wasn't very particular about technology. The armor developed by Ivan was already enough to deal a significant blow to Tony at the exhibition. Hammer already had a plan for this set of armor developed by Tony. He stopped and turned to look at his secretary. Very good. Have the researchers immediately modify it. For weapons, add as many of our Enterprise's signature weapons as possible. The firepower must be fierce. I want to make him a pure war machine. Hammer's goal was simple. Since he couldn't learn the technology, he might as well treat it as a mascot. It could both showcase Hammer Enterprise's strength and serve as promotion. Okay. The secretary lowered his head and took notes. After speaking, Hammer walked straight out. Boss. The secretary suddenly called out to Hammer. This is the materials list Ivan requested. Please take a look. Hammer didn't even take it, his steps not stopping at all. No need to show it to me. Give him everything he wants. Anyway, once the exhibition is over, he won't be working for us anymore. Hearing Hammer's reply, the secretary hesitated a bit, but remembering Hammer's temper, he said no more. Yes, boss. At this moment, in Ivan's independent laboratory, Ivan, who was conducting his own armor research, received a notification from the secretary. Mr. Hammer is very satisfied with your work. Is there anything you want? Ivan sneered. Idiot. Tell him I only want Tony to be ruined. Just don't mess up the materials I need. The secretary's voice carried a hint of doubt. I will. Hanging up the call, Ivan turned his gaze to the armor he was currently developing. He didn't want to rely on Hammer to achieve his revenge. All rich people were the same. Ivan had no good feelings for Hammer. At the exhibition, he wouldn't care what happened to Hammer Enterprise. When the program started, all the armors would attack Tony in front of everyone. Even if he couldn't eliminate Su Xing, Tony would still be worn down. And by then, touching the enhanced armor in front of him, Ivan felt immensely pleased. At that time, he would show Tony what true technology was. Ivan scoffed at Tony's armor technology. He didn't think his own technology was weaker than his. Hammer was right about one thing. Tony was nothing more than a show-off joker. And he, Ivan, would prove it. After completing the final adjustments, Ivan took a break. With a strange, guilty feeling like a thief, he directly took out an incense burner. After confirming that no one was around, Ivan knelt devoutly before the armor. Father, I have finally solved the strange problem at the racetrack. I feel like Sir Newton from a few hundred years ago right now. There are some inexplicable problems in this world. Ivan murmured to himself. All things have spirits, Father. Sir Newton was right. Then, he placed the incense burner in front of the armor and pressed his hands together. God, I believe in your existence. Please witness this moment. I sincerely love my brother. Having said that, Ivan sincerely placed his hand on the whip device. Buddy, I swear, I will cherish you as my brother. Please fight with me and complete this revenge that is about to be accomplished. I will be as firm as you, unaffected by any force. No one can stop our revenge. In Tony's private laboratory. Program upgrade complete. Confirm? Listening to Jarvis's announcement, Tony, covered in sweat and bare-chested, straightened his back. Confirm. Yes, sir. As the progress bar moved, Jarvis's slightly emotional voice resounded again. System upgrade complete. Congratulations, sir. Hearing Jarvis's words, Tony breathed a sigh of relief, putting his hand to his neck and massaging it. Looking at the newly upgraded armor in front of him, Tony was very satisfied. After his continuous work during this period, the new energy source had been replaced. As Tony expected, The new energy source had more energy than the original old version. This was also one of the reasons why he worked tirelessly on the new armor. Feeling the cold touch of the armor, Tony's mood was unusually relaxed for a moment.
Thank you for watching. I
Since
hope you
returning
enjoyed
from the
today's
cave,
episode.
Tony's
If you
state
did,
of mind
please
had
like,
been
share,
in a
and
state of
subscribe.
unease. This experience changed Tony a lot, as if someone had pulled him out of his original life, making him experience all of this. Even now, recalling that dangerous attack, Tony still felt lingering fear. If Su Xing had arrived a little later, or if he had made even a slight mistake, he might have lost his life there. It was precisely because of this that Tony trusted nothing but his own armor. After the Battle of New York, Tony even suffered from anxiety. And from now on, his dependence on the armor was already beginning to show. Picking up a towel to wipe off the sweat, Tony spoke. "Call Pepper back. And call Happy as well." "Yes, sir." With a ring, Pepper's anxious voice echoed in the laboratory. "Oh my God, you finally answered. I don't know how you can still be so calm." Putting on his clothes, Tony said unhurriedly, "Are you almost at Hammer Enterprise?" "Next one." Tony stretched his body. "Good, I'll be right there." "This plan is absolutely crazy, Tony." Feeling Tony's nonchalant tone, Pepper was very anxious. "Just yesterday noon." Tony suddenly made a call, and before Pepper could speak, Tony immediately told her all his conjectures about Ivan's plan. Hearing the news, Pepper felt like the sky was falling. "How many days has it been?" His secretary was a S.H.I.E.L.D. spy, and then Ivan followed closely behind. Recalling what had happened in the past few days, Pepper felt a headache coming on. Ever since Tony announced he was Iron Man, all sorts of troubles had come his way. And what shocked Pepper the most was that Tony's way of dealing with it was to let it develop. In Pepper's opinion, this was no longer just playing with his own life. If not handled properly, all the guests attending the exhibition would be threatened. In the laboratory on the other end, Tony threw on his suit jacket and started to tie his tie. "This is the best way, Pepper. If we don't do this, I can't guarantee what they'll do next time. But this is gambling with the Enterprise. You should understand what will happen if they win." What would happen if they won? At the carefully selected Stark exhibition, through the exhibited products, to the people who came to watch and might become major shareholders in the future. Let alone the horrifying act of killing everyone. As long as one person is harmed by a product, Stark Enterprises' reputation in the industry will completely collapse. After all, if an armor can go out of control, who can guarantee that other products designed by Stark Enterprises won't have the same problem? As soon as she thought of this, Pepper felt a great deal of pressure on her. Meanwhile, Tony replied calmly from the other end of the phone. "Don't worry, I'll handle all of this." Tony gave a wink to Happy, who had already arrived and was standing at the laboratory door and buttoned up his shirt. "You know what? I finally understand why you handed the Enterprise over to me, Tony. And I was so happy before." Seeing Happy enter, Tony smiled slightly and ended the conversation. "Don't say that. Your salary is the highest. It's all part of my plan, trust me." After speaking, Tony motioned for Jarvis to hang up the phone. Looking at Happy, who had a worried expression, Tony snapped his fingers. "Cheer up. I need you to go to the scene immediately and protect Pepper." Hearing Tony's words, Happy nodded, and after a second of hesitation, he still spoke. "Sir, do we really not need S.H.I.E.L.D. agents to help?" Listening to Happy's question, Tony didn't hesitate at all. "No need. I don't want him to suddenly leave me alone in the middle of a fight." Hearing Tony's words, Happy really wanted to refute. But faced with that statement, he really couldn't find a suitable rebuttal. Besides, Tony walked into the armor, which opened with a click-clack, and said to Happy, "This is my confidence." Then, the armor's eyes glowed brightly. The laboratory opened in the air. Tony directly controlled the armor to fly to the scene, leaving only Happy, with a complex expression, in the laboratory. Looking at the somewhat deserted laboratory, Happy spread his hands. He's very difficult to take care of, isn't he, Jarvis? Sorry, Happy, if Mr. Stark doesn't need me, I usually go into automatic hibernation. Please get to work quickly, Happy. Listening to Jarvis's emotionless words, Happy was a little incredulous. No. So, artificial intelligence can also rest? What about me? Am I really just going to survive on one piece of bread a day? After calling Jarvis a few times to no avail, Happy gritted his teeth and accepted reality again. No way. He chose his own boss, so he had to endure it. At the same time, at the Stark exhibition, amidst the excited crowd, Su Xing, who had already blended in, was filled with emotion. No wonder the Marvel Universe's United States is so powerful. This technology, wow? And this isn't even alien technology. Compared to this, Su Xing increasingly felt that Dr. Doom's value was still rising. Relying on a small country, he was able to maintain independence without any control from the United States. No wonder he's S.H.I.E.L.D's highest-level dangerous villain. At this moment, a cheer from the crowd pulled Su Xing back to the real world. Ladies and gentlemen, next, please enjoy the latest invention brought to you by Hammer Enterprise. Seeing Hammer take the stage, Su Xing tapped his earphone. Natasha, how's the mission going? In Hammer Tower. Black Widow, in a black combat suit, neatly knocked down the last security guard. Looking at the database, Black Widow ignored the security guards lying all over the floor. Already here. Listening to Black Widow's voice, Su Xing lowered his finger. Working with Black Widow is always reassuring. But then, Black Widow's request followed. Watch the time, Su. If you leave work early during this operation, I guarantee I'll greatly exaggerate your heroic deeds to fury.